So after that, unionism membership rises. That takes us, and everything's great. The war's over. We roll into 1945. This is where things start getting interesting for Hollywood as far as unionism. The Warner strike, it's called Bloody Friday, October 5th, 1945. There was a strike outside the Warner gates. The Conference of Studio Unions, there was a CSU is what they were called. They went on strike outside of Warner Brothers. And what happened was the IA had already existed. IA was a management union. And the IA stepped in, the studios they held strong against the CSU. And what they did was management paid Teamsters cash to drive busloads of replacement workers, IA workers, across picket lines and through the gates at Warner Brothers. Not the brightest time in our history. And the CSU was defeated. There was a battle. There was an altercation right outside the gate at Warner Brothers. Bloody battle. No one died, but scores of people, I think 40 or 50 people, ended up going to the hospital. Lots of people were injured. Cars were burned, overturned, and all that stuff. This was coming to a head, but that really, really spurned the following action. And this is where we get into the meat of what's going on with unions. In 1947, the Taft-Hartley Act was enacted. Once again, we have to drag in politics at this point. Robert Taft was the son of President Taft. He was a senator. And he was, at this point in time in Hollywood, it was, this was called the Second Red Wave, which was McCarthyism. The first red wave was after the Russian Revolution and Bolshevikism and all that stuff came up. But the second red wave is referred to as McCarthyism. And there was a lot of politics going on in Hollywood, and they were afraid at this point in time, this is before the Cold War started, but right at the beginnings, and they were afraid that there was infiltration from Russian agents in Hollywood, and they were going to use their influence with movies because the golden age of Hollywood was now taking place, and that communism would take hold in America, and this was a fear tactic that was brought on by the government. Sounds pretty familiar with what's going on today. This is why we're going over this history, because if you don't learn from history, it is bound to repeat itself. So the fear that today the Muslim insurgents and all that took place in the 40s, but it was communism, not Muslims or terrorists. Okay, and again, we'll refer back to that. But they sold this on fear. The Taft-Hartley Act is enacted. Basically, it took. It was 6 amendments. There were amendments to the Wagner Act, and it kind of leveled the playing field. It you can go in, you can research and find out what the 6 amendments were. There were actually more, but there was a big fight. Truman actually vetoed this bill, and McCarthy went back to the Senate and the House and got them to overturn the veto, and it actually became law. The Taft-Hartley Act is very important because it gave employers more of an even ground, I guess. Up until that point, labor had the upper hand, okay? Taft-Hartley Act takes us into the 50s. Now, another act, the Landrum-Griffith Act, was another act, and not amendments to Taft-Hartley, it was a separate act. Excuse me. And the Landrum-Griffith Act is about the finances of unions and how they report their money, how they collect their money, what they can charge, and so on and so such. Then we go into 1959, and this is where it gets interesting again, another twist, if you will.